Today I'm reacting to your Friday Night Smackdown hot takes. AJ Lee. We're going to be talking a lot about AJ Lee. Hot Takes is a weekly video series where I give you all a platform to be able to voice your thoughts, whether those are good thoughts, bad thoughts, or everything in between about the world of professional wrestling. So if you'd like to be featured in the next episode of Hot Takes, make sure that you're following me on X because I ask for your hot takes there after every episode of Raw, Smackdown, and every single WWE Premium Live event. And if you are looking for our full review of this particular episode of Friday Night Smackdown, which of course includes our thoughts and opinions on everything regarding AJ Lee, it's already up and available with footage over on patreon.com/SantiZab, where you're going to get the Raw reviews, Smackdown reviews, and a whole bunch of other series that use real footage that we obviously can't post here because they would just get blocked due to copyright. So go check it out. Link in the description, link in the pinned comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I'm incredibly confident that you are going to fall in love with this YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. All right, let's see what you guys sent in. I'm so glad they didn't give us a bunch of teases, 2.5 weeks of name drops, or just give us somebody completely different in the end. They gave us the only right option for Punk's partner in the feud, and I'm so damn glad that AJ Lee is back. Listen, WWE put themselves in a corner where the only person that made sense to be CM Punk's partner was AJ Lee. And now that we have AJ Lee, now we can put our arms together, look to the sky, and say, thank God that WWE didn't fumble this, because had they trotted somebody out there that was not named AJ Lee, even super popular stars like Io Sky or Rhea Ripley, they would have gotten booed out of the goddamn state of Illinois. I'm glad that WWE delivered on this as quickly as they did, and I don't think that's typical of them because in recent memory, WWE and Triple H has loved long-term slow storytelling. I feel like under regular circumstances, we probably would have gotten this on the road to WrestleMania. Months of CM Punk just getting battered and beaten by Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins until eventually lighted up hits at the Royal Rumble or at Elimination Chamber. But because of the ESPN deal, because WrestlePalooza is being built to be this massive first unveiling of WWE programming on ESPN, it kind of necessitated for WWE to pull the trigger on this as fast as possible, and the real winners here are us. So yes, I'm glad AJ Lee is back, and I am double glad that they didn't drag this out because I think, like I said, under most circumstances, they probably would have. Imagine showing this to someone from 2 years ago, they would probably have a brain aneurysm since Survivor Series 2023, hell has frozen over twice. Yeah, I still cannot believe that we live in the timeline that we currently live in. It is genuinely insane to think about the fact that these two are back on our screens in WWE, two people that I genuinely believe we would never see on WWE ever again. But once the dam broke with CM Punk, I always felt like it was an inevitability that AJ Lee was going to return. I thought that AJ Lee was going to return during the Drew McIntyre feud last year. But I'm glad that she didn't return back then because this feud absolutely makes so much more sense for her to return in. So I'm glad that the powers that be in AJ Lee and CM Punk were patient with all of this because they chose the absolute perfect time to bring AJ Lee back into the WWE. You know that there's some WWE fans that in the next week are going to wake up from a coma and see this and absolutely lose their shit, right? Because this, to me, this picture still looks AI generated. I do wonder what goes through the mind of maybe like newer wrestling fans, maybe those fans that got into the product in the 2020s and maybe in the last year or two when it got super popular, because I just don't think that the return of these two and these two being put on screen together is gonna land anywhere near as hard as it is for many people like me that have been watching so long, where we remember seeing these two on screen together 10 plus years ago. We remember the hiatus of those 10 years, and now seeing them together on screen again is still mind-boggling. So forget it being mind-boggling from somebody from 2 years ago, it's mind-boggling to me today. WWE could have kept AJ as a secret as well as they did with Punk, but I can't not be excited. Holy shit. See, I actually disagree. I don't think that you could have kept this a secret because of everything that was going on with CM Punk, Becky Lynch, and Seth Rollins. There was just no way to keep this a secret because, like I said, the way that the story was going, the only thing that made sense was AJ Lee. There was just no way to keep the secret in the bag. Hell, the only way to keep the secret in the bag might have been to extend this for like 4 or 5 months, and I just don't think that people would have liked that anywhere near as much as what we got here. Again, I'll remind people of the first time that CM Punk returned back to professional wrestling, where they never name dropped him in AEW, but he was all but confirmed, and it created so much buzz. It created created such a crazy environment as we just sat there waiting for the inevitable, thinking there's no way that they screw this up, right? I think that in its own also creates a really unique type of excitement that isn't exactly the same as like a shock surprise. Not better, not worse, but still a type of shock. But there was just simply no way to keep this a secret, like 0% chance of keeping this a secret based on the storyline that was being told. Literally, the only way would have been if AJ Lee had have returned the night on Monday Night Raw where Becky Lynch was humiliating CM Punk. That was the only way where it could have been a shock and awe, but even then, it would have still been expected because of what happened at Clash in Paris. If AJ Lee is sticking around for a while, then they should strap the Intercontinental title on her. Becky has done great work, but I think that AJ can elevate that title even further with some fresh feuds and free Becky up to go do something new. So it has been confirmed that this is an extended run. I don't know if it's a full-time run, but it certainly isn't a one-off. So if you're a big AJ Lee fan, rejoice because you're gonna be getting more AJ Lee. Now, I do presume that the big feud for AJ Lee, probably for the next several months, maybe right into WrestleMania, is going to be Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the WrestleMania match is Becky Lynch versus AJ Lee for the Women's Intercontinental Championship. I wouldn't mind AJ Lee winning the Intercontinental Championship. That's a prize that wasn't around when she was a top tier wrestler, the top women's wrestler in the company. I absolutely cannot wait to see AJ Lee go up against the current crop of professional wrestlers because what we have in 2025 absolutely dwarfs the talent that she was able to go up against back in the early 2010s. Yeah, of course, her against Becky Lynch is huge, but we have yet to see her versus Charlotte, her versus Bayley, her versus Lyra Valkyria, her versus Io Sky, her versus Asuka, her versus Stephanie Vaca, her versus Bianca Belair, her versus Naomi when she comes back, her versus Tiffany Stratton. Dude, the list is genuinely incredible. The amount of fresh new dream matches that AJ Lee gives us, the only comparable was CM Punk's return and the amount of fresh new dream matches that CM Punk's return put on the table. This is awesome. Like genuinely, there is no other way to describe this aside from this just being a giant victory for wrestling fans around the world. Lapsed wrestling fans that were big fans of AJ Lee will be coming back to the product to see what the hell's going on. Fans that have been watching for a really long time are now going to get to see fresh new matchups for AJ Lee, and new fans are now going to get to see what the hell was the hype for AJ Lee to begin with. There's very few of these major returns left into the WWE that we can consider like hell freezing over. So soak it in, brothers and sisters, because there's very few of these left. AJ Lee reuniting with CM Punk made me cry like a bitch. I just want these two to be happy despite all of the shit that they've gone through due to Vince. You know, when it comes to the relationship that Vince McMahon had with CM Punk, very few people remember that AJ Lee was part of that really like bad toxic situation here. You know, when people say, oh, they fired CM Punk on the day of his wedding, people don't really realize that he was getting married to AJ Lee. So you can also say, hey, they fired AJ Lee's husband on the day of her wedding. And the removal of Vince McMahon is what allows for these types of reunions to take place. It allows for these bridges that weren't just burned, but were full blown destroyed by a nuclear strike called Vince McMahon and were completely unrepairable to actually be mended. And it makes me so happy that these types of returns are back on the table now that Vince McMahon is no longer around. We're no longer in an era of WWE where it's ego and politics and I like you and I don't like you. It's money driven. It's TKO driven, which does obviously have some major downsides, but it has some great upside because it allows these types of egos to be put aside, these types of former animosities to be put aside to just make the best decision for fans. And that's where we're at now with the return of the likes of CM Punk and AJ Lee. I genuinely don't think that any of this era that we're in happens if Vince McMahon was still out there booking terrible matches left, right, and center that end in roll-ups, disqualifications, and if Austin Theory was still being shoved down our throats even though nobody liked them back then.
Dude, this just is never worth it. That is insane. It's shaking. The camera is shaking.
Again, trying to one-up it.
Oh! Holy Jeff Hardy, Batman. BME. Oh! That was a sneak peek of this week's Wrestling is Cool Match Club, available exclusively over on patreon.com/SantiZap. This week we're looking at the SummerSlam 2000 tables, ladders, and chairs match. It's a crazy one. The match with the legendary crowd that was Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles in Backlash France. A recent classic between Obafemi, Trick Williams, and Javon Evans at NXT Stand and Deliver. The street fight between Becky Lynch and Tiffany Stratton at NXT No Mercy. And a Texas death match over an AEW Collision between Hangman Adam Page and Christopher Daniels. You'll be getting all of this, plus the Raw review, Smackdown reviews, and every single series that we do that has footage that we can never post here because it would just get blocked due to copyright. So go check it out, link in the description or link in the pinned comment. If you try the Patreon even for just 1 month, I'm incredibly confident that you're gonna fall in love with it. If you're already a patron, thank you so much for your support. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do what we do as often as we do it, but let's get you back to the video. Chicago always gets the coolest moments. Brother, they really do, and I do think that Chicago is an amazing crowd. I love Chicago. I cannot wait to personally go to a Chicago show, but you guys know, you know yourself, Chicago. You guys are also the most spoiled wrestling fans because what you guys have gotten over the last several years is insane. Just in WWE, you got the two craziest returns of the 2020s. You got AJ Lee and CM Punk. Hell, you guys got the return of CM Punk twice. The return of CM Punk to wrestling in general in AEW and Rampage, and the return of CM Punk to the WWE. Chicago, man, you guys get all of the best stuff except WrestleMania. It's been a while since you guys have gotten one. The Sami Zayn US title open challenge better be answered by people like Mello, Aleister Black, Andrade, not different MFT members every week. That's what I'm hoping for, and the fact that they had the moment where Sami was able to take the mantle and get the approval and the blessing from John Cena tells me that we're going to get something that has a similar soul to John Cena's US Championship Open Challenge, which had guys that were on the same level of the ones that you listed here. I agree, if it's just Solo Sikoa and different members of the MFT, that's a huge disservice to what the legacy of the United States Championship Open Challenge that John Cena created is. I love this. I love the idea of Sami Zayn just saying, hey, you want some, come get some, and if it means the likes of Mello, The Miz, Aleister Black, Damian Priest, Andrade, Rey Fenix, all getting opportunities, absolutely 100%, man. It's just going to lead to awesome matches. It led to amazing matches and matches that you would have never expected for John Cena, and I hope it does the same for Sami Zayn. Also, kind of crazy that Sami Zayn got booed out of the building, right? Sami being booed isn't surprising. The underdog character is holding him back. Not just him, the stories he's involved in also. Work rate has never been the issue. I am glad that you put that there at the end. Work rate has never been the issue. I don't think the issue has ever been Sami Zayn, the professional wrestler. I think the issue has been WWE and what they have booked from a character standpoint of Sami Zayn. You're right, the whole underdog thing has been a complete joke. They've tried to retcon that and say, no, he's not the underdog. This is WrestleMania main event Sami Zayn. And they can try and be wishy-washy about it, whether he's the underdog, the WrestleMania main eventer, but it doesn't change the fact that I do think that the damage has been done from all of this wishy-washy booking from the WWE. And in a previous video, there were people saying, see, look how big the pop was for when he won the US title was. The IWC and the internet rumblings don't mean anything. I told people, wait till it gets stateside, because I could have gone out there in front of the French crowd and tried to crash this can of Mountain Dew Zero on top of my head, and they probably would have lost their shit, and they probably would have thought it was the most amazing thing ever, because the Paris crowd was putting anything and everything over. But now that we're stateside, now we're gonna get to see the true reaction to Sami Zayn's championship victory. Here's the thing, I also think Chicago is not the correct crowd to get the proper barometer from, because Chicago is historically a counterculture crowd as well. We'll see once we get to like Toledo, or when we get to like Portland, Oregon, whatever the hell, right? That's where we will get to see the proper reaction to Sami Zayn's reign. But now that he's going to be doing an open challenge, I think it's going to end up being positive, because we're going to get to see new, unique matchups that we haven't seen before for Sami Zayn or for the US title. So I think that in itself is going to generate a lot of goodwill from fans towards Sami Zayn. Goodwill that if the Chicago crowd is indicative of anything right now, he kind of needs. fans. Brock costing that John Cena versus Sami Zayn match was really disappointing because I feel like they should have done it after, but it is what it is, I guess. Brother, I've never groaned harder than when I heard Brock Lesnar's music. Many of you guys that are longtime viewers already know that I'm not a fan of Brock Lesnar. Allegations aside, I'm purely talking from a WWE perspective. I did not like Brock Lesnar in the 2010s or in the 2020s. I felt like he was just kind of there to, yes, be an attraction every once in a while, but more than anything, he was booked in a way that really held down a lot of the talent that we always wanted to see succeed. So I've personally, unfortunately, have learned to just dislike Brock Lesnar. I don't like him in my matches. I certainly didn't want him to be part of the John Cena retirement tour, but like you said, it is what it is. We're here. I was just so annoyed that Brock Lesnar stopped this match because it was just so damn good. I wasn't expecting John Cena to win. I really was expecting shenanigans at the end of the day, but it would have been awesome. It would have been hype. But hey, at the end of the day, they elicited the response from me. I hate Brock Lesnar even more now, and I'm rooting for Cena even more than I already was. So I guess mission accomplished. But I'm just not excited at all for Brock Lesnar. We already have a part-timer in Roman Reigns, and I don't think that we need another one. Not only that, but we also already have monsters that can play the Brock Lesnar role. The likes of Oba Femi, the likes of Braun Breaker, the likes of Gunther, the likes of Bronson Reed. We have the people to play that role. So why rely on somebody to play that role on a part-time basis? I'm over Lesnar. I just am. Now, if you like Lesnar, I'm not telling you to dislike Lesnar, that he needs to stop being your favorite. I'm just giving you my opinion. And I've held true to that opinion for the past 14 years. I didn't even hear what Becky Lynch was saying because the boos were so loud in-house. That is something that is not being talked about enough. Yes, how awesome was it that AJ Lee returned? How great was the beatdown? But here's the thing. It was made as satisfying as it was because of how good Becky Lynch was in the lead up to that process. Becky Lynch was such a piece of trash, man. She was an awful human being. She played that role so well to the point where people wanted CM Punk to start GTSing her out of existence. It takes a special type of character to be that good at being so annoying, and Becky Lynch did it in a way where it didn't generate go away heat. It generated, I want to see this woman get her ass whooped heat, which in turn made the return of AJ Lee feel so much more impactful. It made it land that much more. So shout out to Becky Lynch, man. She absolutely deserves her flowers for helping make the AJ Lee return as impactful as it ultimately was. Not really a hot take, but I'm happy for you. You got to witness a Chargers win and an AJ Lee return. Listen up, folks, because I've already booked my tickets to San Francisco for the upcoming Super Bowl, because based on that amazing performance from Justin Herbert and the good old Chargers whooping the ever-living ass out of the Chiefs, we are winning it all. Am I delusional? A little bit, but yeah, I had the best night ever, man. Watching the Chargers absolutely own the Chiefs while also getting the return of AJ Lee. What's not to like, man? I had the perfect Friday evening. John Cena has been giving banger matches since his babyface turn. Now I really feel Cena didn't need that heel turn. We could have got so much great stuff if Cena was babyface throughout his entire retirement tour. Why are people acting like the matches during his heel run were bad? The Randy Orton match at Backlash, banger. The tag team match at Money in the Bank, banger. The feud with Ron Killings was so much fun. The match against CM Punk, banger. The match at SummerSlam, banger. John Cena was delivering excellent matches with the exception of his terrible, what seemed purposely terrible match at WrestleMania 41. So no, I'm not somebody that's gonna regret the heel turn. In fact, I'm glad that it happened because it allowed for matches that made sense against baby faces that would have been really hard for him to make a logical feud against, like Randy Orton and CM Punk. And of course, Cody Rhodes. So I'm glad that we were able to experience that, but I am happy now, more so that he is a babyface so that we can get the traditional John Cena that we fell in love with going up against the big bad heels and absolutely destroying them on the mic. But no, I'm not going to be somebody that regrets the heel turn. Could it have been better? Absolutely, 100%. And I'll never put that on John Cena. The problem will always be the lack of being able to execute the ending with The Rock and Travis Scott. But I will stand on the business that the matches that he had during his heel run are incredibly memorable. I think this
this match isn't a WrestlePalooza because Cody Rhodes is going to return, and they know that his return will main event any show, so they are going to do it on SmackDown 2 weeks before so Cody and Drew can have a match at WrestlePalooza. By the way, WrestlePalooza, I'm still just not used to that name. Hearing Brock Lesnar go, "See ya, WrestlePalooza, bitch," it reminded me of just how silly that name is. Anyways, that's not what you wrote in about. I'm kind of pumped that they're doing Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton on SmackDown because I thought the way things were going that it was going to end up being a WrestlePalooza match without Cody Rhodes, but with it happening a couple of weeks before WrestlePalooza, like you said, does give us room for Cody Rhodes to return to set up the match with Drew McIntyre or maybe a triple threat, just something bigger for WrestlePalooza that should hopefully involve our undisputed champion and not just a match for the opportunity to maybe somewhere down the line face our Hollywood champion Cody Rhodes if he ever decides to come back. I don't understand the hype of AJ, my honest reaction. Listen, I'm going to be super civil about this. Either you don't understand the hype for AJ because you weren't around to see her work because her work was very good, or you don't understand the hype for AJ because you were around to see her work, but you were underwhelmed with the matches and the storylines and the feuds that she was a part of, because I actually completely understand that. But that is not on AJ. That is on the era of women's professional wrestling that she was a part of. She was a gem in a sea of trash that was women's professional wrestling at the time because WWE wouldn't give them more than like 3 to 5 minutes per match. And that's like genuinely being generous. I feel like most women's matches at that time would be lucky to get 2 minutes. So if that is all that you're going off of, I can kind of understand why you might be confused with the AJ Lee hype that's going on. But the way that I'm seeing it, because I was part of that era where women's wrestling was just not treated very seriously, I'm seeing somebody that was just in the wrong era of women's professional wrestling now being teleported to the correct era where she can actually have dream matches and have an onslaught of amazing feuds to work with. The hype isn't just about AJ. The hype is having AJ in an era of women's professional wrestling where she can actually be allowed to flourish. That's where the hype comes from. Having Brock Lesnar return in the same episode as AJ Lee was disrespectful. It was intentional to have that early in the show so that they could sneak that in and receive little criticism, knowing that everyone would be talking about AJ at the end of the day. I think you're overthinking this. I think the simple answer is clearly WWE doesn't give a damn about the Brock Lesnar criticism. I don't think that they were trying to hide him. If they were trying to hide him, they wouldn't have him go up against the most recognizable WWE superstar on the planet right now, John Cena, during his last few days of his retirement run. There's no sweeping Brock Lesnar under the rug. We just now have a TKO, a WWE that just simply does not care about the criticism or any backlash regarding Brock Lesnar. Clearly, they just don't. Julia versus Michin got the main event match on SmackDown. I don't know if it means Julia will be pushed, but it's a good first step. I think what we have here is the most optimistic WWE Julia fan of all time. I never would have considered Julia versus Michin being the main event, but yeah, I guess technically it was the in-ring main event of that episode of Friday Night SmackDown, but it was put in a spot on SmackDown where it was like the dead spot that nobody's gonna remember. But I guess technically, if you want to look at, glass like full situations, yeah, I guess Julia was in the main event. Do you think that's a good first step? Do you think she's gonna get pushed? I got like no indication out of that match that that's gonna be the case. Thank you. Butterfly effects are a real thing. There is a timeline somewhere out in the cosmos where Jack Perry and CM Punk became buddies, and they didn't do the whole real glass. They didn't have the brawl at All In that got CM Punk fired, and none of that stuff happened. So the whole butterfly effect that has us in this crazy timeline where AJ Lee and CM Punk are back in the WWE are because of this guy. Literally the only disappointment of SmackDown tonight was the announcement of Jade Cargill versus Tiffany Stratton and Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre, and that it's taking place on SmackDown next week. Both matches warranted being on WrestlePalooza. I'm glad that Randy and Drew isn't, because I'm hoping that, like we talked about earlier, that there is room for Cody Rhodes to return to make that into something bigger going into WrestlePalooza. Jade Cargill versus Tiffany Stratton, that I am a little bit confused by. I don't think that this WWE Women's Championship has anything of interest that could warrant getting it onto WrestlePalooza if they're already going to do this on SmackDown. Like, think about it. Like, if this match happens on SmackDown, can they do something within 2 weeks to get you excited for a women's WWE championship match at WrestlePalooza? I don't think so. I think this was the play to get on WrestlePalooza, and that they should have used the next several weeks to actually build an interesting storyline, unlike what they weren't able to do at SummerSlam. So yeah, I agree. I'm confused and surprised that they're pulling the trigger on Jade Cargill and Tiffany Stratton that quickly. I feel like Damian Priest and Aleister Black should keep their feud going. They have good in-ring chemistry and would even love it if they went for a street fight at WrestlePalooza. I thought their match on SmackDown was okay. I thought that it should have been better to get you excited and to get you demanding a street fight at WrestlePalooza, which is what they were doing with Sheamus and Rusev. They did a great job at making us demand more out of that feud and hopefully get it on a PLE like they ultimately did. And then Sheamus and Rusev went on to have an unbelievably good match at Clash in Paris, to the point where I thought it would create more confidence in feuds like Damian Priest and Aleister Black and letting those blow off at PLEs. But from what I saw at SmackDown, I wasn't particularly so in shock and awe that I demand for this to be at WrestlePalooza. I actually thought it was a little bit underwhelming, but I know that in a street fight environment that this would be absolutely awesome. Why did Sami suddenly become Superman? I feel like it kind of just makes Cena look weak. Okay, yeah, that was insane. Like, think about what Sami Zayn endured in that match. He was able to get out of an STF. He got out of an ankle lock. He kicked out of an angle slam. He kicked out of a pop-up powerbomb. He kicked out of an Edge's spear. He kicked out of a multitude of AAs. This guy was a monster in this match. So underdog Sami Zayn, my ass. The Dr. Lily segment was really fun, and I can't wait to see a lot more of these dynamic interactions with Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair. I actually think we need way more of this. I was hoping that we would have a lot more social interactions between these two, but over the last couple of months, they truly have just focused on them being pretty much exclusively in ring. So I'm glad that they were able to bring back another backstage conversation to further develop the social interactions and the social dynamics between the two, because I feel like that's what people fell in love with in the first place, and they started to slowly abandon that and make them exclusively like in-ring fighters. So I hope we get more of this. Genuinely, I thought that this was a super cute segment, and it made me fall in love with Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss a lot more. Seeing John versus Sami, it gave me hope that we might get to see Cena versus AJ on an episode of Raw, and they'll put a banger just like today. I didn't think of that. I think that's a really good point, especially because John Cena is done on Friday Night SmackDown. His last few remaining like shows of weekly WWE programming are only going to be Monday Night Raw, and there's some big venues, man. There's MSG, there's TD Gardens in Boston, and I think an impromptu match with an AJ Styles would be a hell of a way for him to cap off one of those episodes of Monday Night Raw. I think it's absolutely on the table, and I'm glad that you pointed this out because I didn't initially make that connection. All right, folks, thanks so much for watching this episode of Hot Takes. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Yes, AJ Lee returned. It's insane. Goodbye. Get out of here.